Welcome, good afternoon. Today we're discussing monitoring and evaluation, and I'm really excited about this discussion because indeed this is sort of where it gets more tangible and we look into the specifics, let's say, of the energy transition. And also we have interesting speakers today. As you know by now, these online training sessions are part of the Go Energy Transition Community Project, and it's been let's say, led by the consortium where we have Tinky, Tri, and Econoler. And here on the call today, we have myself, Len, and Laura from Tinky, and we also have Ricardo from 3E with us. And there is two sets of training sessions that are regarding the policy and regulation that include 8 workshops or 8 trainings. And these have been going on last week, this week, and the coming week. And the main discussion, although we're going through different phases of the, let's say, policy and regulation, as I'll discuss in a minute, the main focus here is to discuss what are the challenges, what are some of the obstacles, what are some of the good practices that we can bring, but also what are some of the, let's say, actions or tips that we can provide from our work before and in the discussion with you also, hopefully that sparks some ideas also from our side, but also from your side, on what could be done further for energy transition, After the training sessions, as I mentioned also yesterday, you will be receiving a training certificate. There is a Go platform, which will be made available soon, where all this material is uploaded to. And you will receive an evaluation form after each of the workshops. So please, after each of the trainings, so please feel free to let us know what you think, what you enjoyed, what we could do better. As I mentioned earlier, this is in a set of 8 trainings that we're implementing. Now we're at the end of the second week, or the 5th session on the policy. And today we're discussing monitoring and evaluation. And next week, we're going to dive deeper into the regulation, specifically the regulation principles, but then also designing of the tariff, and then the regulation for energy efficiency and renewables. And we have some really interesting speakers lined up for today, but also for next week. And the agenda for today, aside from hearing from me presenting the agenda, I will also in a minute go through the slides on what are key performance indicators, how to define them, and how to use them. As I'm sure this is not the first time you hear about KPIs. I'm sure you already use KPIs, but sort of coming together on the same page on what those KPIs should be to make sure that the implementation is efficient and that you can actually follow and monitor the implementation. Then after me, we'll hear from Han, our colleague from NTNU, and also European Climate Pact ambassador, and he's been working a lot with the cities as well, and he'll be presenting some of the examples in the process of the policy and then how monitoring feeds into that. And then we'll hear after him from Akim Erasmus from Aruba Utility on Aruba's national energy policy. And then we'll have, the idea is, of course, you see some of the timings here, but as up to now, the idea is that please feel free to join and ask questions even during the presentations. You don't have to wait for the questions and discussion. And we'll also try during the presentations to make those pauses in talking so that you actually have the chance to ask us a question, All right. Any maybe reactions at this point before I go into the discussion on the KPIs and sort of setting the stage for today? And for those that just joined us while I was presenting, welcome, good afternoon. We're looking forward to this discussion today. So let me share the other screen. Here we are. So I'm sure some of this will be maybe things you have already heard, things you're already using, but it's sort of so that we're all here on the same page on what do we consider under KPIs, key performance indicators, why they're called like this, what they need to integrate to be good ones, and maybe some of the examples of the indicators as well. So my presentation will be split into two parts. First is what are key performance indicators, and then how to use them in monitoring and evaluation. Yeah. So key performance indicators are basically set targets that are used to measure progress towards energy transition objectives. So in this sentence, you already see some of the aspects that key performance indicators have to have. So they're targets, so they have to be very specific. They're used to measure progress, so it has to be something that is measurable, so not vague, not general. Yeah. And it, in this case, for our discussion, we're looking into the targets and the key performance indicators for energy transition. Why not just call them indicators? Why key performance indicators? And here I go into sort of each of the words, why they're used and how they define what it is. Key basically means that the indicators that we use should be referring to the main objectives. So while we can go ahead and create KPIs for each of the different actions that we have, each of the smaller actions and sub-actions, it is the most important to have them for the key actions. So for the main objectives that we're planning, yesterday we were discussing the action plan. In the action plan, if we have specific actions defined, then for each of the actions, we should set KPIs so that we can actually measure the progress. Yeah. Performance means that they have to show effectiveness in progress. So we can just say it's done, yeah, but it should be that that you can follow it through the process of the process until you reach, so that you can say just finished, yeah. That there is a, let's say if you say 50% getting there, that you can follow at 10% and 15% that you're going in the right direction. You can follow the path, let's say. And then, of course, indicators, that's level of progress. And you'll hear it later. I'll provide some also documents where you can find some of the indicators that are being used for energy transition and see which one of those makes sense for you. And typically we call them KPIs, and this is how I will refer to them for the rest of the presentation. So what are good KPIs? And this is something, if you heard it before, I'm sure you remember it because it's made that way that it's meant to be easy to remember. So we typically say that KPIs have to be SMART. So if you see the first letters of the explanation, what does that mean? That they have to be specific. So we have to say either in percentage or in numbers what is going to happen, or in energy units. There needs to be some sort of units that say specifically how they define to the objective, how they're related to the objective. Measurable, again, if you set specific units or you say number of things. So for example, let's say you say we want to raise awareness. That's, as a KPI, saying awareness has been raised doesn't really, it's not really something that you can measure. If you say you want to raise awareness in 5 years from now, 1 year into it, you cannot say how far are you in that, yeah? But if you say, in order to raise awareness, we want to organize, let's say, 2 trainings each year, one set of trainings for the local level, 1 set of trainings for the national level, or the trainings need to be in the first year on the topic of energy, the second year on the topic of, I don't know, environment or let's say emissions, then you can easily check if this has happened. So a year in, you can say, okay, did we have 2 sets of trainings? Yes, no. And then so on as you go to the 5th year, so then you have something to measure and to quantify if this has happened. Achievable, that's really important, because if we set KPIs that are not achievable at all, then everybody's going to be discouraged to do anything. So if you say, coming back to my raising awareness, if you say we want to have 50 trainings in a year, that's not possible. So it's just, you're not going to get there, and you know from the beginning that you don't have the budget, or you don't have the time to organize, or you cannot organize people this much, then it's something that already stops you from implementation because it's already too high. Yeah. Or if we say in 2 years, we want to have 100% decarbonization on the island, and you're now at 5%, it's not realistic typically, unless it's a very small island, and then you can achieve this with like 2 installations, and you already know that these installations will be done, then it might be achievable for you, but typically it is not. So it's really important with your transition team, which we discussed yesterday, to sort of map out, be honest in the SWOT analysis that we mentioned on the strengths and weaknesses, and to understand what is achievable. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be ambitious. Yeah. So it should be ambitious, but something where you can sort of map out the path towards achieving that. Yeah. And then relevant. We see this still today in not only in action plans, but in many projects, that there is KPIs that are defined because they sounded good, yeah? But they're not really relevant to what is our goal, what is our objective. And then you spend all this time and collect all this data to calculate if your KPI, where is your KPI, and then you have it. And okay, you monitor this KPI, but it actually does not tell you anything about the topic that you want, yeah, about your objective. So the KPI really needs to be directly related to your objective. So for example, if you say, I don't know, we want to decarbonize public transport, let's say, and then you say, okay, KPI could be decrease in the, let's say, hours of use of public transport, doesn't necessarily tell you anything about if you're decarbonizing public transport, yeah? So if you want to decarbonize public transport, you want to use KPI that is very much relevant to CO2 emissions of the public transport. And you say in percentage, for example, the decrease of CO2 emissions, or you say in comparison to, and I'll show that number because it's really important also to mention what is your baseline here. And then time bound, you've heard me say now with all the examples that I typically set a deadline, yeah? Typically your target and objective, you already have a certain deadline in mind. So political goal that is set is typically up to 2030, up to 2040, and so on. With the KPI, you also want to set a specific timeline and deadline, but you also don't want it necessarily to be in 15 years from now. So then everybody is like, okay, well, we have plenty of time. If we start working 10 years from now, then we'll be fine. So that you have a sort of in-between sort of, let's say, KPIs, let's say in 5 years, so that you can still revise, you can update your action plan, you can update your KPIs in 5 years, depending on which direction you're going to. When I mentioned the measurability of KPIs, so typically for energy transition, KPIs, and typically, okay, that doesn't necessarily exclude if there is other, this is more for example's sake, yeah? So you could have a KPI, let's say, that's connected to the energy units, which we keep when we do the energy balance, like we mentioned yesterday. We keep it either in kilowatt hours, in joules, in ton of oil equivalent. So you say, for example, a certain generated renewables, or a decrease in consumed energy. So you say it in units. But more likely you will use percent shared or percent to say decrease by this percentage, so that, and then you say to which year, you know? Energy intensity of an economy is one of the, let's say, indicators that you see also coming up later in the presentation. That's joules per euro. So how intense is your energy sector, let's say. And then energy dependence of a country is very important. So looking into how much are you depending on the other countries on specific resource, or on energy, specific on electricity if you're interconnected. And then, as I mentioned, percent share, and then decrease in CO2 equivalent emissions, which all of these mean that some overview of the current status, which we discussed yesterday, needs to be there. So there needs to be a year on which you have made energy overview, yeah, for different sectors, that you can then say in comparison to that from the year And it doesn't have to be if you're doing it in 2023. If you don't have data for 2023, it could be that you set your baseline to 2020, maybe not 2020, because that's a bit odd year due to COVID, but let's say 2019, that's more typical year, yeah? Using that year as a baseline and then saying in comparison to that, today, we want to achieve a certain percentage by 2025 or by 2026, yeah? So as I mentioned earlier, some examples of indicators, and again, these are really important. Every sort of word in your indicator, in your KPI can be important and can make the KPI either achievable or not. Because, for example, you could say achieve 70% of renewable share in electricity production by 2040. That's much more achievable than saying achieve 70% of renewable share in total energy generation or in total energy consumption. Because typically in total energy consumption, you also have fuel, yeah, for road transport, for marine transport, for air transport. You also have heating and cooling. So it becomes a bit more challenging, let's say. So it's very important to see what percentage share are you saying. So it's not just 70% renewables by 2040. What does that mean? Of what? Yeah. So every time you say percentage, you should say of what. Then, for example, if we say decarbonize 50% of road transport by 2035, that's an okay KPI, but it would be better if you say, for example, in comparison to specific year, because if you say decarbonize 50% by 2035, depends to which year you're calculating. You could easily say that it's already you're already there, let's say in 2 years. So, but I'll go to this in a minute. What are the important parts when you're for using the KPIs for monitoring? But let's say, as I mentioned earlier, for each of the actions, it's good to specify KPI. And as they're more specific, that makes it easier also to know what exactly to do. So for example, if you say, have a subsidy scheme for households to install solar thermal for hot water to decrease residential energy consumption by 10% by 2030, then it's sort of clear, okay, the idea here is that there is an action to install solar thermal for hot water, and that's how we are going to decrease residential energy consumption. Because if you say, for example, and then you're measuring installation of solar thermal, you're also measuring use of the other fuel that was used for hot water, yeah, to see if that has actually happened and if you have actually decreased energy consumption. So this is an energy efficiency measure. And it makes it easier than if you just say decrease or increase energy efficiency in households by 20% by 2030. Then it's not as clear what exact actions are supposed to happen. Just like I mentioned, for example, raising awareness. If you say, for example, organize 10 workshops, then it's clear that you need 10 workshops by that year, and then you can easily check it off and you can measure it as the years go by. I provide here in the next slide. In the next slide, I provide two, although this is not, there is many publications out there, but these two I found useful. One is on the national energy and climate plans, which European countries adopt, and there is set of indicators that are mentioned, although this is a monitoring document, but there is a set of indicators that are mentioned in there for energy transition that are being used. And there is also this other publication on set of indicators that can be used for energy poverty. Now, what's important here is that they're indicators, so they're not KPIs yet. So, for example, we would say energy dependence, that's an indicator, and it tells you in what units typically to do it. But for your specific actions and for your specific action plan, you have to say decrease energy dependence by certain percentage by that date. So that only when you specify it and when you specify it to your specific objective, does it become a KPI. Yeah. So maybe I want to pause here just to see if there is any questions. I'm almost done. Okay. Then the second part, which is short, is basically how to use KPIs in monitoring and evaluation. And here it's sort of some, let's say, tips or lessons learned from before. So, which I mentioned now 5 times, I think, that there should be a KPI per action in your action plan. So not general KPIs, they should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and related to time, so SMART, Then very important one, to use the same methodology to calculate the indicator. And this seems obvious, but you wouldn't believe how many times we've seen this one being a problem, that people use one methodology is used today, let's say when action plan is being set or a program is being set or whatever, and to set the KPIs, and then 3 years later, a completely different methodology is being used to calculate that indicator, and then you're comparing apples and oranges, It's not the same. So it's really important when setting the KPI in that same document to also, maybe in the annex, to leave the methodology, how the KPI has been calculated and what databases have been used, especially for CO2 equivalent emissions, so that the same can be used later on when the KPIs are recalculated. The same for the baseline, So that makes it easier if you, in the KPI, already mentioned the baseline. So then there is less confusion. But if you say, for example, 30% decrease in energy efficiency, 30% decrease in energy consumption by industry by 2030, if you don't say comparison to what year, then it makes it more difficult and it's more prone to confusion, So it's easier than the KPI already to say what is your baseline. And then monitoring on yearly basis, but that's something I think also Han will touch upon, makes it easier to follow what is happening. Of course, we've seen many action plans come on board, and then there is not much monitoring and evaluation, and then there is just a new action plan 5 years later or 10 years later, not even commenting maybe on what worked, what didn't work in the previous one. But ideally, if you want to have the policy that follows what's happening on the ground, there should be this feedback to evaluation and monitoring, which in a way is a bottom up, because you have to collect the data and to know what actually happened on the ground, to then come back to the policy or to the action plan and say, okay, we had this goal, these were the KPIs, this is how much we got, this is where we got. It's okay if we now want to completely scratch it out and not have the same objective, and then we want to set something else, but it would be good as a lesson learned that the mistakes are not repeated, that there is a process on yearly basis, if possible, to collect information, to see where we are, and to sort of check what has happened. And KPIs really make it a tool to do this correctly, because the better the KPIs are set, the more easier it is to check what has worked. Did it happen or did it not happen? Let's say example, this project, that we're implementing with you now. So let's say in the project, if we said, we're going to increase knowledge of people on the islands about energy transition, it would be a bit more difficult for Go program to check if we have done that well or not, because they would have to check the knowledge at the beginning or awareness, and then check at the end and see, was this affected by what we did or by something else? So it's much easier to say, okay, organize a set of trainings, or organize quality set of trainings that the islands will participate in, and then later you can say, okay, set of trainings organized, we can check it out. I know it's not always as easy as that, because some KPIs really take a lot of calculation, and they take a lot of, let's say, even sometimes having to set up an automatic calculation to be able to do that. But the simpler the KPIs initially, the better, so that are understandable for everybody, so that they're actually followed and easily calculated. All right, I stop there. I'm gonna stop sharing. Any questions, comments at this point from your side? Feel free, no? Okay. So I'm going to assume it was clear. I see Andrea nodding, so I'm happy with that. I don't see the rest of you guys. All right, then if that's okay, and Gilbert, thank you. I would like to give floor to Han.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes. Han, I wanted to introduce you.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I think you deserve the introduction. So, Han van de Vevere.
Van de Vivere.
Van de Vivere.
Yeah.
He's an associate professor at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, and also an ambassador for the European Climate Pact. He's been at the NTNU for 5 years, and he's been focusing on the areas of EU smart city and community projects and positive energy districts. As an ambassador for European Climate Pact, Han has also been project manager and senior researcher at Energyville, which is Union of Flemish Research Institutes of KU Leuven, Catholic University Leuven, VITO, and IMEC, which are Flemish research organizations for research on sustainable energy and intelligent energy systems for over 7 years, where he focuses his expertise in the fields of sustainable urban development, energy transition of the built environment, and transition management. Han, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Please take the floor.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, Lucia. And thank you for inviting me to share my experiences on working with cities in the domain of climate action planning. I'll start to share my screen. Just a moment, please. I start well. Okay. Here we go. I hope this is visible. And I will go to presentation mode. Can I be heard well? And is the presentation visible?
Hear you well. The presentation is still not in presentation mode, though.
Now it is?
Now it is, but we see the presenter.
Yeah, we saw the next slide.
Oh,
so all the
okay.
joy and the tension is gone then.
Yeah, I have the same issue.
I need to
so,
swap. I need to swap.
Yeah,
and
just swap.
That is where is it?
If you put it in presentation mode, because I've had this problem now for a few times. So put it in presentation mode, and then at the top of the presenter's view, it's not in presentation mode.
No, but I know there is some place.
Yeah, it's when you put it in presentation mode.
Han, if you go down to the right of your screen,
you
should be able to see this thing that.
Yeah, and now at the top, at the top left, you have the display settings. If you click on that, and then there is the swap screen.
Yes, but the problem is that I don't see that.
There at the top. No, at the top. There, next to that, display settings.
On the right, display settings. And move to the right, 3 centimeters. To the right.
Yes, but
display settings, you see that? Next
no,
to
I
show
don't see it. You see
taskbar,
something else.
It's covered
you see something
by
else. I really don't see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will stop sharing. I will try again. I'm really sorry for this, but
no,
I really don't see the interface. Just a moment. I will try something.
Yes.
Okay, now I have that screen.
Good, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And now you should see my presentation as it is intended, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry for the hiccup. So as I said, I will tell you a bit about my experiences with city climate action planning. Now I say cities, but the methods that we use are okay for small cities, for big cities, for regions, and as much also transferable to islands. Now, Lucia gave a very rigorous and theoretically correct introduction to using indicators. What I propose to do is have more kind of practical story about how is my experience with doing those things with cities on the ground. So since 2011, I have started to work on climate action plans. And so I will rather speak from my practical experience. That's one thing. The second thing I would like to insist on is that I prefer to work in an interactive way. I can't see all of you, but please, if you have questions or ideas or remarks, raise your hand and I will ask to Lucia to give me a sign, because I'm not sure if I can see the raised hands. But if you have a question, or shout or raise your hand, and I will see then if Lucia points to the fact that someone wants to discuss something. So really, please feel free to discuss. I really don't want to give a story that is coming from one side. I prefer to also discuss and exchange ideas or problems or opportunities with you. So given my experience with working in cities and with very different stakeholders, I've called my kind of summary story a climate action planning survival guide, because you run into many things. There's very nice things happening. There's also things which make you get gray hair. And so I'll give a bit the overview of, let's say, my biggest lessons learned. So first about indicators. As a scientist, and I made my PhD on indicators, I know that the discussion of about what is the ideal indicator set, it has been going on for decades, and it will go on for decades. So we can discuss indicators and never get to the perfect indicator set. And one reason is that indicators indicate something. So they point to something, but they are not the thing. So they are just worth what they are. And you need always to think of what you're trying to reach. That's what Lucia also said in the SMART characteristics. Keep always in the back of your mind if you are in a practical way heading at what you really want to realize. And if we say climate neutrality, sustainability, future-proofness, there are two baselines that we can follow. These are also two baselines for the European Union. The first requirement, which is really very closely related to mitigating climate change, is make sure you get to 100% renewable energy. Renewable or sustainable energy, there are some sources of energy that you can use that are not renewable, but it's very sustainable to use them. Think, for example, of waste heat. But in a principle, we go for 100% renewable energy. In Europe, the target is to have it by 2050. The other thing, which is also linked to that, is evolving to 100% circular economy, which means closed loops in all products, materials, but closed loops in a way that you don't make the big loop all the time by completely dismantling products and going to the very basic materials in the recycling, but try to close loops as narrowly as possible, which means if you speak about technical products, repairing them, remanufacturing them, rather than throwing them away and then dismantling them to the basic materials and trying to recycle the basic materials. That's one of the basic ideas behind the circular economy. You have also on the left side, and you have the same for bio-based materials. So in this scheme, there are two spheres of interaction, and the technical materials and then the bio-based materials. And there is a slightly different approach, but you will also try to make, for example, use of cascade use. So using a first time and then a second time for something else, and then maybe a third time still for something else. And so burning waste or bringing it to the landfill should always be the very last option. So that's a second important goal, especially also for the European Union. And we speak a lot about climate, but this one is extremely important because we are also in far overshoot in our material use, material extraction, mining, all the energy needed to keep those material loops going. So it's becoming more and more important, and it goes hand in hand with what you do on the energy pillar, on the climate mitigation pillar of your actions. This is technical, it's material. What we really aim at is what I call 100% livable places. And what we want is a good quality of life, not only for us, but also for the next generations. And of course, indicators for good life should then also be relevant. We do exercises on that, but that's really the thing we want to achieve. Maybe a few more schemes that go around the idea of energy and materials, and then you have also water. That are the three basic entities. Water is a kind of material, but how does this function and how does it interfere? So we can look to the metabolism, to the way systems function as if they would be organic entities. So you have your infrastructure, which is represented in the middle. You have your buildings, you have industry, you have roads, you have your mobility sector, and you're using land for that. And you pull in energy, you bring in water, and you bring in materials and products. And I see someone wants to ask something or say something. Andrea?
That was my job.
Yes, with regards to what you were just sharing about 100% livable places, just because when you started sharing, you were talking about the baselines, which were European. I was wondering if when you're talking about 100% livable places, that also includes a European baseline aim, or is this more general?
The 100% livable is not a European explicit target. It's what I conclude from my work to keep in mind when you start up the processes. But whereas in the beginning the European Union had a very technical approach to the target, it has been introducing new things like the Green Deal. One important aspect, one pillar of the Green Deal is leaving no one behind, or the just transition, which means Europe has decided, like, we don't do only the technical thing, we want social justice also. On top, what the European Union now introduced later on also is the new European Bauhaus, which is a policy scheme that says, let's not only look to the sustainability, but let's put as a target that things are sustainable, inclusive, and beautiful. That's a policy target now. So you see that from a technocratic approach, the European Union has been expanding to social justice, inclusiveness, beauty, because they have probably understood as well, as I do when I work with the cities, that when it's not appealing to people, if you just slam them with numbers like you need to reduce your carbon emissions and you need to make your material use sustainable, that's not very motivating. It's an obligation. That's why the attractivity of life is something that convinces people. So yes, it is in policy elements of the European Union, but if you put a baseline, I would say 100% livable spaces are really 100% livable places are really what you want, and your carbon neutrality and your circularity are going to make sure that that is possible in a long-lasting way. Is that sufficient answer? Okay. So when we connect energy and materials, I will not go into the details of this scheme. You will see that also you have interferences. From water, from wastewater, you can extract residual elements. For example, from sewage water, you can produce gas from that. You can produce fertilizers. Of course, you can burn materials, organic waste in a cyclic fashion to extract energy from it, and so forth and so forth. And so what is important is that from the material point of view, you start to understand how the whole metabolism of your village or city or region or island is functioning. And a nice example of such an approach is a project in Sweden. It's a district in Stockholm where they built a whole district. It was an urban industrial area. They raised the industry and they built a new quarter, and exactly they used that interference scheme, that metabolism scheme, to define how the district works in an environmental way, looking at energy, at waste materials, and at water, and then making a whole system where input of the one thing comes from output from the other thing. So that's what we mean by the metabolistic approach, and that is what's connecting also your energy and materials story. That's a view of Hammarby in Stockholm, that district. And you see on the tags, and you see all the elements coming back. But again, okay, there is water management, there is organic food, there are solar panels, and so forth. There's sustainable mobility. But you see that the total image is a place where people like to live and to stay in the public domain, to chat, to work, whatsoever. And that's what we are aiming at in the end. Something we are also working on very hard is what we call co-benefits or win-win situations, or still another word, coupling opportunities. This has to do with the fact that when you do certain interventions regarding energy or materials, it's not always evident. It often doesn't fit the normal business case. The normal business case, which is the euros or the dollars or the whatsoever, the money baseline doesn't say to you that you will go one step further to implement a sustainable solution. To stretch up the baseline, you can go look for co-benefits. And like this, you get an extended, what we call value proposition. You get an extended project ID with more stuff coupled in, which can convince also the people that need to put the money on the table that this is worth investing in. So I'll go very briefly through that. These coupling opportunities or these co-benefits, you can imagine it as a chain of impacts. And so we use the fishing net analogy. Like if you do one intervention, which is climate action related, whether it is installing renewable energy or retrofitting buildings or building a new bus lane or a bike lane, if you do it smartly and you pull that node, for example, you build a new bike lane, which is safe, convenient, not dangerous, which has maybe solar shading by trees and so forth and so forth. You build that bike lane, you make an integrated project, you also plant the trees to have shade. I say something. You will see that by pulling that node of the bike lane, you pull all other nodes as well, like safety for active transport, like landscape quality, like carbon emissions, because more people will bike and less people will take the car, your emissions go down, and so forth. And so thinking of the whole web of impacts of a project that is more than just the bike lane, but it's really an urban project on promoting sustainable mobility and giving all the parameters to make it very attractive, that makes that you get a whole web of impacts that you move at the same time. And so that's what we try to do in cities, is to make sure that if they do an intervention, that they think of all the possible co-benefits and that they integrate those co-benefits into the project. So I will give one simple example. For the city of Bruges, there is a ring road around the city, which is 4 lanes, 2 times 2 lanes for cars, and a very narrow bike lane, and that's it. So there's a whole lot of traffic on that ring road. So the proposal here is if we limit the ring road to 2 times 1 lane for cars, but we put very wide bike lanes, eventually we have a special bus lane. We put much less asphalt, more green, more trees. Then we have the direct benefits, which is we reduce the attractiveness of cars, so we reduce car use. We have more people taking public transport and biking. So we have a shift to sustainable mobility. Our carbon emissions go down. But at the same time, by completely rearranging the whole strip of ring road around the city, making it more green, and with less car traffic, we have less noise, we have less air pollution, we have higher safety, we have a better landscape quality, we have more green, less urban heat islands, we have a better water management because the rain can infiltrate in the ground, it's not going over the asphalt into the sewerage, and we have an infrastructure that is ready for our climate goals of 2050. So these are the co-benefits of doing that project. And so if you bring in all these co-benefits and you monitor them properly, again, you need indicators for that, then you have another business case, as to say, to convince local authorities that doing the whole intervention is worth the effort. So for that, we are currently developing an impact model within projects that are in the European new Bauhaus calls. So Europe issues calls for projects, and some of them go under the label of New European Bauhaus. So we participate in 3 of those projects, and we have developed an impact model of which you see the scheme here, which looks to 5 categories of sustainable performance: environmental performance, healthy living, which is indoor and outdoor quality of life, social cultural performance, economic performance, and governance, how the whole thing is being steered. And then we have impact categories and we have indicators. Outside the outer ring of pebbles, these are the indicators. The inner circle of dots is the impact categories, and the 5 blobs are the what we call the pillars. And it's by looking at the whole picture that you can start to make links between indicators, and those links between the indicators, that's how you work with co-benefits. So that's what we're trying to do now with 14 cities in Europe, is to map what's happening and to identify as much as possible co-benefits. And then, of course, be able to measure them with indicators so that you can make a story which has arguments that convince people. I'll keep it very short. What are typical co-benefits of climate action? Higher energy independence, I think, is very, very relevant. For us in Europe, with the Russian war, that has become extremely relevant. When you are on an island, of course, if you need to ship in fuel, that's not a nice story. So the more you can become energy independent in that sense, the better. Reduced energy poverty, very much linked to that. If you make your environment less polluted, more safe, more beautiful, you have reduced social and health expenditure. People are not only healthier, but also happier. We know that people that live in retrofitted houses, that come from a very bad state in a normal state, feel much better. And it can even be calculated as cost for psychiatric help. That's really been proven in the UK, that repairing people's houses and making them airtight and energy efficient made them feel much better and go less to emergency services, but also having less psychological and psychiatric costs for treatment. Of course, less pollution, better and safer living environments, higher quality of life, a better safety, but both physical and traffic safety. We know that in sustainable buildings, people are more productive. It can be very spectacular. I heard one story, which was a company that built a sustainable office. And then they said, what is the payback time? The payback time was like 30 or 40 years. But after some time, they discovered that people were less ill. And when they took into account the decrease in absenteeism in that building, and so the savings in salary cost, because people were working instead of being homesick, the payback time of the building was not 30 years, but 11 months. Because your salary cost is much higher for a company overall than the investment in your building. So that's really something that you can eventually calculate. And again, it's an argument to build nice, livable, sustainable places, because somehow it comes back to you in another way. Less traffic congestion, so no losses, economic losses, because people are stuck in traffic. A high real estate value. For example, take two streets that are completely the same, one with trees, one without trees. Houses will typically be 10–15% more expensive in the street with trees. And it's also a nicer street. And it has shading and so forth. More social public spaces, less car traffic is more place for people to meet, to chat, to use public space. Reduction of urban heat island by more green, more water in your urban environment. More local employment, it's extremely important. And jobs in sustainable mobility, in sustainable energy, in a retrofit are, you have many more jobs per dollar, euro invested than what you invest typically in fossil fuel industries. So the number of jobs you create is much bigger. If you have that local green economy with renewables, the money you spend on energy stays in the local community. It doesn't go to Qatar, it doesn't go to Russia, it doesn't go to Saudi Arabia. The money stays in your economy, which reinforces your economy. So it's very important to enhance your local green economy, because it gives a leverage, again, back, circulating back the money in your economy and not having a money leak outside to other countries. Less critical dependence on supply chains, more circular economy, so more internal loops. But for example, also less dependency on water for processes that are linked to typical fossil fuel industries. So I'm taking quite some time to tell you this, because we feel that in order to convince all the players in the game of taking another kind of attitude and doing other investments, you need to make it very tangible. What are all the benefits? And so it's good also if you have indicators, if you follow up what's happening, so that you can prove that those things are happening. Now I'll go rather fast. I'll just give a few ideas on materials. Maybe some things very bottom up, very practical, and a few things that are more ambitious or more theoretical or more extreme, but just to give you an idea of what you can do, or of at least of what we are doing around in Europe. So about materials, I'll start with materials and I go to energy. As we said, close the loop and try not to recycle basic materials, but recycle or reuse or repair products. I just give you a few nice examples. This is an organization in Brussels. It's called Rotar. And what those people do is basically go to all the demolition sites and dismantle anything that is of value, whether it's lightings or tiles or door handles, or you can't imagine. I've been in that shop, you find anything there. I've sold my spare materials from my home retrofit also to the guys that they come with their van and they pick up the things, and it goes again in the loop. So that's really nice. So try to dismantle, reuse as much as possible. This is becoming feasible. 10 years ago, this would not exist except for antique stuff like really historical tiles from Delft or something like that. But now you see companies appearing that recycle bricks, that go to demolition sites, pick up all the materials that are worth something and put it again in the commercial loop, which is much better than grinding them and using as a foundation for a road, for example, if you speak about tiles or concrete elements.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is it legally in Belgium to go to those demolition sites and pick whatever you want?
No, you would ask the permission. What people do is go to the owner or the contractor, the people that are responsible for the building site, or the owner of the building signals Rotor that there will be materials, but they also actively look for it. And then, of course, you have an agreement or even a contract about the fact that that party can come there and dismantle this and this and these things. So in my case, I had sorted out the materials myself. I put them ready. People come with a van. I call them. I say, I have stuff for you to sell. Are you interested? I sent them pictures. They said, okay, we're interested. We pick it up and they put it in the shop. And they pay me a certain amount.
Okay, but then that means there's any kind of, I mean, from the sanitary department, so you are using things with asbestos or something like that. There's no, I mean, inspection on anything like that before that?
I don't know the details, but I can tell you that in Belgium, because we had big factories producing a lot of materials with asbestos, we are very much aware about the asbestos problem.
Okay.
I'm not sure what Rotor does, but I'm pretty sure that they will check on asbestos, because you understand, if ever they get negative publicity because they are selling toxic stuff, they're done. They're finished.
Yeah, I think linked to that is also that since I think more than a year now, if you sell a property, you have to have an asbestos certificate, which checks every detail in your house. So it's a destructive test. They will take part of your plaster. They will take part of, you know, a roof tile. It will be sent to a lab. And that is a required certificate. You cannot sell the house without it.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
but
people
it's
don't like it so
remark.
much, but yeah.
It's very relevant, and I would indeed always make sure that the checks and balances are in place, so that indeed toxic or danger or whatsoever components are sieved out and getting a proper treatment. Yes.
Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Another thing which is bottom up, which is also gaining popularity, is what we call repair cafes. So people in the community coming together, and instead of, you know, typical the CD player after 3 years is broken, but maybe it's just a little wheel that needs to be replaced. I'm speaking of experience, but because that's how I repaired mine. So instead of throwing the thing, having a nice come together and put together all the skills and the intelligence and start to repair things. Of course, it needs to be possible to dismantle, to open, and to repair. And we know of certain producers that they make products in such a way that you hardly can open them. That's why new regulations are upcoming to make sure that products are repairable.
There's a very important remark to this picture, Han. You have the mouse. Could you indicate this box of chocolate there? So the point with this is down, Han. Don't say you don't recognize Leonida's box of chocolates. Go to the right. There. So and that's a super important aspect. You see, it's as much a social thing than. It's super important also for the social cohesion and hence for the chocolate business in the country.
Yeah, and I will tell you also a nice anecdote. Actually, now people can say, we have a new idea, repair cafe. You know, my grandfather was a farmer and his farm was very close to the village center. And he had a big workshop with tons of tools. He had a bench to work iron and so. And anyone in the village was coming to him with stuff to repair. So he was a local repair cafe long 50 years before the word was invented. So I think we need to go back to this attitude of like, indeed having the fun of not throwing things, but giving them the second and the third life. Right. Now, going to the other extreme, which is really on the urban scale, some colleagues of mine have been involved in projects where you really work at the scale of these kind of apartment buildings. And so this is in the Netherlands. This is this kind of 70s buildings. It's huge concrete constructions, and they're no more fit for purpose. So what do you do with them? And so here they did an experiment by cutting out parts of it and then building new houses with that. The whole logic then behind is also that next time that you use and build things is to make sure that not everything is glued or welded or whatsoever together, but that you can disassemble it so that it's designed for disassembly, which is much better in your reuse and recycling strategy than things that you can't take apart in an easy way. And so what they did was they went to the concrete structure, and then they started to cut out parts, floors, and so forth. And what they also did was recycle concrete on site. So grind it and then ground it and then use the grind. Plus, of course, as it should be, dismantling where possible, reusing, separating the waste, and so forth. But here you see the project in action. So we're on top of the building, and then, but this is really spectacular. It's more kind of like show off what is the possibilities. But I have seen projects like that in Eastern Europe also, dismantling communist blocks, cutting parts out of it, and making very nice urban villas out of the remaining structure. But you can do that.
Han, I also put in the chat window the garage that was developed in Grenoble. Remember when we visited, they explained, So that's a super nice building. They designed it with the idea that they wouldn't need it as a garage within 10, 15 years. So the sizes are such that you can afterwards turn it into a super cool apartment building.
Yeah. I need some indication of time. Okay, that's fine. Right, the garage in Grenoble, good, you put it there. Right, okay, and then here you see that those cutout parts are being mounted on a new foundation, and then they're being completed. And in the end, this is the concrete recycling plant. So instead of having 500 lorries bringing away the concrete waste, processing it in an industrial site, and another 500 trucks coming with concrete, make the concrete plant where you have the demolition site. There are also disadvantages, because people that live nearby were hearing the grinding machines all the time. Okay, that's something you need to take into account. Maybe you need to have a community meeting, say, can you stand it for 3 weeks or 5 weeks? Do you agree that we do it? So think of the whole process, but having the recycling plant on site means that you avoid a lot of transport. And voila, you have the result. So even that's pieces of concrete that come from the demolition, and you make a kind of natural stone wall with it. You cut out parts of walls, and you make new kind of composed bricks, and so forth and so forth. So this was, as I say, an experiment on the other extreme of large scale, very ambitious kind of circularity exercise that we are sometimes doing. Okay, that was a bit about materials, about energy. How do we work? Europe has reporting formats for energy and climate. These are in the Covenant of Mayors, and the Covenant of Mayors has what it calls reporting sectors. You have buildings, you have transport, industry, and you have others. That's very simple. And so within those big sectors, you have then the subsectors, which are also very evident: residential buildings, non-residential buildings, communal buildings, and the local authorities buildings, private transport, public transport, and communal transport, and the own car fleet of local authorities, industry, which is industry and agriculture, and then other sectors, which are lighting, and so forth. In Europe,
we have 2 questions, and I think they're more related to the previous slide. There is a question that asks, does the ability to easily disassemble impact the structural integrity of the building? I'm thinking about hurricanes. And then the second one is, does the quality of the concrete remain the same?
Yeah. From my experience, what we see in design for disassembly is that you will often see, instead of concrete structures that are, of course, cast together because they need to have a rigidity, you will see steel or wood structures that are bolted together. And of course, those structures, you can always brace them, diagonals whatsoever, to make them earthquake resistant, hurricane resistant. So the structural integrity can be provided as far as I have seen examples, and there is no problem with doing so. What regards the quality of the concrete, of course, you need to be very careful when you recycle the concrete that the amount of pollution, for example, by plaster, is under the limits that you need to set to have a healthy concrete. Now,
Han, there is also new research that shows that there's a lot of unbound cementos in concrete, and that you're actually activating that when you're grounding it and reusing it. So it reduces the amount of cementos that you need in a recycled concrete.
Yeah, but you know, so I know one case where I really asked the architect. There was a first in Flanders, and where the architect said we will use recycled concrete for structural reasons. So they needed to do a whole lot of tests and destructive tests and so forth, because they needed to prove that it was good concrete. And it appeared that the recycled concrete was stronger than they had been expecting. So maybe indeed, Lynn, because of the unbound cement, but or you make it in concrete and you have the normal prescriptions of stability whatsoever, rigidity that you need to have, and maybe you cast it together like you cast together a concrete structure. But so the cast concrete from recycled ingredients can be even stronger than what you would expect. And if it's not concrete, if it's steel, wood, and so forth, as I said, nothing impedes you to make it dismountable, but sufficiently braced and sufficiently strong to indeed resist strong loads. And there was another question.
Yeah, that was the second question. The concrete was the second question. The first one, hurricane. So both are covered. Thanks.
Yeah. Then maybe so a bit more about industry. Yeah, Europe has a tendency then, because there is a system with emission trading, Europe lets out of the concern of the cities the heavy industries. But okay, that's not so important for the moment. What I want to tell you briefly about how we work with the energy question in cities is that we think like where do we want to go? We want climate neutrality. What we do as a first shot intervention is look at how much the city uses as energy on a yearly basis. So here at the left column, you see the energy use of the city of Bruges in 2018. Anything which is orange is electricity and heat in buildings, residential buildings, non-residential buildings. Green is industry and agriculture, and blue is transport, mobility. That's the energy use, the final energy use of the city of Bruges in 2018. For anyone who likes numbers, it's 3,000 gigawatt hour. In 2018, there was also renewable energy in Bruges. There are wind turbines because we are close to the sea, and there's solar panels, and there's some biomass and a waste incinerator that gives energy to a district heating system. So the renewable and sustainable energy was something like, I don't know, 450,000 megawatt hour or so, 450 gigawatt hour. Now, as a first shot, and this, just to start a strategy, it's not a fine tuning, it's really the first steps. You can say, if on a yearly basis, we would produce as much renewables as we use energy, then on a yearly basis, we would be climate neutral. So we can work on two pillars. We can increase the energy efficiency In our cold climates, it means insulating buildings, switching to sustainable transport, more walking, more biking, more public transport, and electrifying cars, and making industry more sustainable. You see that the green ones, we touch not so much, we don't ask too much from industry, yet we can very drastically reduce the energy consumption. That means a whole lot insulating of buildings. That's a very tough challenge. It's thousands of houses per year. Not sure we're going to be able to do that in Bruges, but at least we have calculated the challenge. The city now knows if we want to reduce so much energy in heating in the homes, we need to retrofit, for example, I say 2,500 homes per year in the city. And then you can act on that. The same for energy. And so we made some plans. We looked at what was feasible. And we came to the conclusion that we can have really a lot of wind and solar production in Bruges. And then you see if we match column 2 with column 4, that's a moderate effort on energy efficiency, but a very big effort on renewable energy. Then they equal each other, then we are climate neutral. If we put a lot of effort in energy efficiency, reducing the energy demand a lot, and we are more moderate in renewable energy ambitions, we can also reach the goal. So it's like a menu card. You say to the city, you can do this or that, and to reach your goal, you choose from the menu card. What are you going to do? What is everyone going to do? And that's the basis for discussion. It's clear. And we also visualize it. We make a nice scheme. Because if I would tell you this in words, you would be lost in translation. If I show you the image, it's clear. We always try to talk also with images to visualize the goals, the indicators, the quantities, so that people really have a look and feel of what we speak about. Now, Bruges is a special city, not only because it's a tourist destination, but because it's very close to the sea and it has a big harbor area, which means we have an awful lot of space to put wind turbines, which most other cities in Flanders, in Belgium, don't have. So we can have a lot of wind. And the nice thing about wind and sun PV combined is that because they are intermittent, they are variable. Because they're different character, when there is a lot of wind, often there is no sun, or when there's a lot of sun, often there is no wind, they more or less balance each other. Which means that not only on a yearly basis we have those energy quantities, but we have a first step in balancing the energy system with renewables. It's always a dynamic problem. You will always have more sun or less wind or more consumption. So you need to try to level out. I think especially when you're on an island, this balancing locally will become extremely important. So you will need solutions, demand-side management, maybe storage. I mean, it's an important issue to consider also. I'll skip this. So if we then go to the sectors, we look to the sectors. Of course, the European story, and especially the Northern European story, is totally different from what you are confronted with. I guess that in your context, insulation of buildings will not be really a major axis of intervention. I think that having a lot of solar energy will be paramount. Why? We in the north of Europe, we need heat and heat pumps. And heat pumps are electric, and we need them in the winter when there is no sun and no wind. When it's dark, gray, and snowy, so we have a problem. In the south of Europe, it's easier because they have a dominant cooling load. When do you need cooling? When the sun shines and then your PV panels work. So in the south, in the sunny south with a cooling load, solving the energy puzzle is a little bit easier than in the north because you have the energy à volonté, without limits, as to say, when you have in your buildings the cooling load. So it's a bit easier, I think. And I think so, as far as I can judge for the range of geographies, I would think that I would not spend extreme efforts on energy efficiency of buildings, insulating them for cooling purposes, for example. Not sure, you can consider it, but I think that especially having sufficient
And
renewable.
we see that many of the roadmaps or many of the plans of the targets of the islands do have energy efficiency goals included. And it is often because indeed their buildings aren't airtight. They are not using the thermal mass for the cooling. And as a consequence, for example, there's often a lack of, which we have here as well, a lack of a decent control on thermal devices. And there's still a lot, for example, of non-LED light. So old light bulbs are still used a lot. So with regards to energy efficiency on a lot of the islands, there is still a lot of room for improvement.
Okay, if I don't say building skin, well, if you need to cool, you also are better with insulation.
Yeah.
Of course, all appliances and all other forms of wasteful energy use, yes, definitely. I mean, I will still say, and it's correct, Rein, I mean, energy efficiency first is always a good starting point. But I think you need to balance it with investments in the renewables and see where is the tipping point. When do I stop with reducing my consumption and then I fill up the remainder with renewables? That's an exercise you need to do. But definitely the best energy is the energy that you don't use. That I completely agree with that.
And there is a question
Yeah.
in the chat, although it's directed to me, so I think other participants don't see it. But the question is on your previous graph where you're showing the changes that were needed. Yeah, how much investment did it take to get to the last graphic, and also what is the time time frame within which this was done?
So. The European Commission did a study on the needed investments, and I don't want to scare you, but they said that on top of business as usual, for a city of 100,000 inhabitants, on top of business as usual, you would need 1 billion euro. We made a rough guess for Bruges. For Bruges, all the interventions together, Bruges is a city of 120,000 inhabitants, and we came to say 2-3 billion euro by 2050. 2050 is the target year. Now, what the Commission also calculated was that in the case of the 1 billion surplus investments to reach a climate target for the 100,000 people city, the economic the economic profit figure of changing your local business, so the total economic profit of all those surplus interventions would not be 1 billion, but 1.2 billion euro. So you make a huge investment, but in the end, you get out more of it. So yes, it's tough numbers. I mean, if you go to a city like 100,000 people, you say you need 3 billion euro to invest. It's not nice. But if you say you're going to get out in the end, over the life cycle, you're going to get out 5 billion euro in surplus value in economic output, then we're talking about the case. So very much of this, and that has been proven by banks also. Citibank made a report on climate investment, and their conclusion was, if you fully invest in climate mitigation, your avoided costs are so enormous that it's a no-brainer. The only problem is that you need to have that money now to have a return on investment, or that money needs to come now in a regular stream to have return on investment that is on the long term. And that's, politicians don't like it. Entrepreneurs have difficulty because they are in a competitive environment. So it's difficult because it's beyond short-termism. But from the long-term perspective, economically, it totally makes sense.
I see, Gilbert, you're unmuted, and this is a question from you. Do you have anything that you want to add?
Yeah, actually, it sounds like wishful thinking, but I like the idea. Those, as we started with the key performance indicator, it's gonna be difficult to gain somewhat. We are trying to do here with this graph. If you take in consideration, we are more or less 100 something thousand people here. Not with enough market, it's gonna be either investment from abroad, partially. And I don't see, it's just a remark, I don't see it feasible or smart for us to aim towards something like this right now. It's more just to reach, let's say,
yeah. Well, the point is, we're not there in Europe neither. Eh? I mean, this is all wishful thinking in Europe as well. Hannah and me work with the city of Bruges.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just to give you an example, and I think that's for many of, if I think about Aruba as well, very typical housing, the measures often proposed are also disruptive for the view sometimes.
Yeah.
And that holds back people with regards to, the view of the city and municipality. But I can imagine if tomorrow in the capital with all the nice fancy colored houses, you start putting BIPV or PV, there's going to be resistance. So, I mean, the point that Han makes is that these investments will, of course, generate jobs, and that helps as well. It will keep people on the islands. That's also an important aspect because it's that local element. While if you would be continuing to bring in oil, then the dollars are literally going to countries that provide you that oil. So that's a bit the way of, will Bruges reach 100% climate neutrality by 2050? Let's hope. But to be really honest, that's 27 years from now, 26. They'll have to change a lot.
That's a good idea, though, I must say. And on terms, referring to what you said about the awareness of energy conservation here, indeed, we don't have legislation or directives as such, but we started, I think, from, let's say, 10, 15 years ago, thinking about energy saving bulbs and stuff like that. So I would say if we can at least reach the first graph, it would be good for us in 2030 or something like that. Okay.
Indeed, that's what I said. Although, indeed, the presentation was a bit more theoretical, but that's where, when you organize the transition team, and that's what we see on the islands. And I wanted also to bring in as an example specific KPIs that I can find on the islands in Europe, but yet they're still not there. They're setting up action plans that say in which direction they want to go and what are the projects they want to do, but you still don't see the specific saying this percentage. You see the general goal, so that's why you haven't seen those from me either. But indeed, that doesn't mean, because the final goal might be a bit further away, that doesn't mean that there isn't actions, as Len and Han both mentioned, that there isn't actions on the building level, on the transport level, which seem maybe easy and obvious, but they still provide some, let's say, improvement and get people on the board. Because we also have one of the questions in the chat is regarding that. So what do you do with buildings which were constructed and built not with energy efficiency in mind, back then, and then a mindset of people to change that,
Okay, thanks.
Yes, what you also can do is select test areas, pilot areas, and start small with experiments. Like, if we do this and that, if we attack the building like that, if we change that, if we put so much PV, and so forth. Start with a few pilot projects, try, and then if it's successful, scale up.
Yeah, that's actually what Søren, we had Søren as a recorded talk on one of the first sessions, and that's what he does on the island of Samso as well. He engages the people in a lot of test projects where, there might just be a building that is even not used, where they can come in and experience a certain technology or a certain, material or stuff that they can sense, so they feel confident in, they can, go out and come back in, stay for a day to see how these new technologies work, and see the data of stuff and stuff like that. And that really helped to gain confidence of the islanders of Samsu in the various technologies that were introduced one by one, because if you start doing it all of a sudden, it's not going to work.
Yeah. Plus, and yesterday I was in a study forum on district heating networks, and I see always coming back the same thing. People resist change. They resist an idea. Someone does it. It works. And then everyone becomes jealous. Then they want it all. I mean, sorry, sometimes it's also psychology, but I have seen with retrofit projects, they were really having trouble finding a pilot building. They did the retrofit, the building looked nice afterwards, and then everyone's calling the project like, oh, can we also have a retrofit, with mobilities like that, with district heating system, I always hear the same stories. The first one who moves has a lot of trouble. When it's there, it can be seen, and it's looking nice, then people ask for it. So that's also a reason why piloting and doing experiments and trying to get the good new type of project and then show it off, it really helps to move things.
Han, as a good moderator, I just want to mention
Yeah.
that it's 7:30, and
Yeah.
if it could, maybe, I know that there is a lot of examples, and I think that's good, and the slides will be provided also to people, but maybe let's say another 5 minutes. Is that okay?
Yes, because I was going to say that I'm halfway in my presentation, but I have no intention whatsoever to go on. I put a lot of graphical material out. Well, okay, we have mobility. You can look at this as model shift, but the slides speak for themselves. About just 2 minutes. This is Italy.
Yeah.
It's a country of Maseratis, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, and so on. It's like Germany. It's a bit a car freak country. This is Bolzano. It's extremely hot there in summer. It's like a cooking pan in the mountains. They made fantastic bike roads, and it's full of bikes. It's full of bikes. Italy is not a biking country. Bolzano is a biking city. I was there in the heat wave. Everyone was on the bike. Fantastic, because the bike lane is in the nice green areas. It's close to the river. They just made the infrastructure for bikes so attractive that it's more attractive to get on your bike than in your car. So I have a number of examples there. Okay, mobility. I also listed up some challenges that you need to address. So certainly capacity, people knowing about energy, knowing the technologies, and especially also getting women on board in technical sector and so forth. You see an example here. Just go as much as you can to build the right capacity, because you need a lot of skills and people for that. Measuring with citizens.
Yeah, that's a cool.
Measuring car traffic and bike and lorry traffic with very simple devices. You let citizens measure. If they measure, they're aware, and they come to you and they say, there's too much traffic of lorries in my street, and I've proven it. So please do something about it. Air pollution was a huge effect in Belgium. People put very simple monitoring tubes on their windows, and they could prove that, for example, around the schools, with all the traffic jams of all the parents bringing their kids to school by car, it was a hell of a pollution. And it started to put a lot of things in movement. Now there are car-free zones around schools because of the air pollution that they wanted to kick out. Drought, a whole citizen monitoring campaign to have data on how dry are our gardens and how dry is our climate in the summer. Fantastic data collection. Okay. The rest, I'll just show you. Finance. If you talk to financiers, make sure you have the risk management thing done. Financiers come to you, they speak about risk. No risk, they go, risk, then they say no. Sorry, I'm putting it very simplistic, but it's a message I get. It's a message I get all the time. Get in your local economy, make the governance process. That's what the last thing I want to say is try.
Han, sorry, we are beyond this. We have introduced already a couple of lessons ago
okay.
multiple helix. Why because on the islands, the environment is so much, I mean, it's so much present, but it's also so important that we've discussed this, and then we added the environment on top of it.
I
Bringing
think it's
to the
brilliant.
quintable home. To,
Well
yeah.
done. Well
Yeah.
done. Okay. No, that's perfect. Very good. Okay. Examples in cities. And then the last thing I stop here. Imagine how your island will look in 2030,
Yeah.
2050. Make images. Get around the table with people. I mean, the nicest stakeholder here on the images, this one is already sleeping, but okay. But I love this. I
Yeah,
love this situation where
while sleeping.
people are coming with the kids,
Yeah.
giving milk to the kids in the session, but because it's about how is your future city or island going to look like.
Yeah.
So this is before, this is after. This is before, this is now, this is after. This is now, this is after, and so forth. We did that exercises. We had one politician here in the city who said, you shall not show that image to the right because all the shopkeepers will be shocked because this is a local shopping street. They need to be able to go there by car. I mean, you don't publish it. It doesn't go to the press. You don't show it to anyone. 1 year later, the same elder man was using the right image to promote climate action in his city, because he had understood after 1 year that no, it was not counterproductive. It was the future of his city, and he needed not to defend the cars but promote the future. So it took some time for him to shift his mind, but finally that worked. Okay, I'll let it here. Voila.
Thank you, Han. For the people who saw, I mean, who have a mobility issue, the small device that Han showed, Telram, is something that maybe I can bring to the workshop, so that you can see it. So, are there people who are facing issues with massive traffic where this would be of value? If yes, then just type it in the chat window, and then I'll bring one, and then you can see how it works.
Oh, bring one.
Yeah, I'll bring one. So I need to write it. I'm actually going to immediately ask Kathleen to order it for me, because it's literally citizen science. It looks now great. In the beginning, it was a very ugly small device, very low cost, but it really brings that engagement of people, and it's a very cheap way of measuring. And you can afterwards put it somewhere else, and when it's not needed anymore. But it brings you very accurate data, as you can see. It measures the type of people coming through as well.
Okay, all right, thank you, Han, for a very interesting presentation with a lot of examples. I would like to move on to our next speaker. We have Akim Erasmus here from the utility of Aruba, and he's going to talk about the national energy policy. Akim, hi, welcome.
Hi everyone. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Yes, good.
Will you be sharing the
you.
presentation?
Yes, I will be sharing my presentation.
All right, go ahead.
Yes. Is it visible?
No, we don't see it yet.
While you're doing that, I'm putting in the chat the map of where all these little meters are of Telram. And you have to zoom out because they start to be throughout the world, even in Taiwan and in the United States. So I'll be bringing some so we can expand the map.
Akim, if you click on share screen, the green button at the bottom.
Yes, I have clicked on the share screen.
Okay, and then you choose either your presentation screen or your computer screen. Ideally, your presentation, different screens should show up in front of you under basic.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
then you click
screen, and I selected Microsoft PowerPoint.
Okay, and then click share.
Share, and then allow Zoom to share the screen. Open system preference.
Do you get a specific message or?
Yes.
What does it say?
I get it. It says allow Zoom to share the screen, open system preference, security, and privacy to grant access.
Okay, you have to allow, yeah. Can you just click allow Zoom to share screen, or because it seems like that has been disabled?
Hmm.
Wait, I might have your presentation. I have your presentation. If you want, I can share it. And then you just
Let me resend it because there has been a small
okay.
notifications.
Will you send it to Laura?
Yeah, I will send it to the same email that I sent it before.
Laura, can you share it then?
Yes, I'm waiting for this email.
Yeah, wait.
While we're waiting, I see there is questions in the chat. Then one is regarding the Telegram reader, but
Yeah.
it's for you, for Angela. And then we have a question to Han. The question is from Gilbert. So maybe Gilbert, you want to ask the question so that I'm not asking.
Yeah, that's okay. Han, seeing the last slides you show, I noticed some, or at least I got the impression that you're implying ownership as well from the government and the local residents regarding their city. Is that correct? Or I'm just assuming? To be more exact, you showed the last slide on how the city would be with the locals sitting around with babies sleeping and so on. But it gave me the impression they were designing and otherwise approving government plans toward how the city would like to be in the future.
Yeah. What we did in that place was, we called it a roadshow. It was a European project roadshow. And what we actually did was challenge the local politicians with a procedure, a way of working that is not the common way of working. And we are not at the point that effectively citizens now sit on the table and co-design at the city just like that with the city. But we made a very clear, we made a very clear statement. What we do arrive at for the moment is that whereas in certain cities, it was only the planning department that checks the boxes and says, you go ahead, the real estate developer can go ahead. That's being changed into a horizontal process where not only the planning department, but the people from economy, from social affairs, from tourism, from the heritage and so forth are going to be involved in a horizontal cross silo way to think about a project and everything that needs to be realized in terms of benefits, co-benefits, before the brief and the design is done in a single tunnel vision. That's where we are arriving now. Next stage is indeed, and we hammer on that, is that when you are going to work on a refurbishment of a district, that before everything else, you start to involve citizens, not just informing them, but asking, because they are, for that living area where they are the experts. They know best how their quarter functions. So that's what we try to introduce. It is kind of horizontal through the competences and co-creative approach, where you involve non-professional actors, the people that live there, that work there, that invest there, because they have another expertise, and it's for you, for them that you do that. So we try to bring in elements of another type of process, but it's not like today we have that situation.
No, Han and me also went to various places like Izmir and Menorca and these kind of things to really go outside, because if you only do it and you mention it in a local magazine or on local social media that there is such a gathering, then you will get a certain type of people. If you really proactively go outside and talk to the people, this is where, first of all, students, as we already mentioned, can play a big role because they have more time to start engaging with others. But it's also where you get completely different stories. Hannah and me in Sevilla were sitting on a bench talking to people about their air conditioning, and then you get the frustration, but also the type of people that you would otherwise not get if you would just invite them to come in. So it's really that proactive engagement that is highly relevant as well.
Okay, thanks. I see the presentation is almost
Yeah,
done.
I see Akim's
Yeah, yeah.
presentation. Akim, please go ahead. Thank you both for your comments.
Okay. So one of you guys will slide this slide for me.
Yes,
Yep.
probably, please.
Yes, I will.
You will? Okay, thank you. Okay, so welcome, ladies and gentlemen and colleagues. A good afternoon, and thank you for being in this event, this session. My name is Akim Erasmus. I'm honored to be here and to share a short story introduction to Aruba's national energy policy. The purpose of this presentation is basically to unravel the policy goals and the strategies to achieve the vision of the minister's cabinet waiver Koers Doos 2. The factors that influence the future and the future energy demand and the development of the energy system and the future energy supplies in Aruba. That's the ultimate factors for this energy plan. In alignment with our government's commitment, the national energy policy will serve also as a vision, a beacon, guidance towards a future characterized by resiliency, innovation, and sustainability. As a Master of Science student in sustainability for engineering at the University of Aruba, I find myself in a uniquely positioned and the intersection of academic inquiry and real-world application. Slide, please. The purpose of this national energy policy is clear, written. It is basically to foster innovation, embrace technological advancement, ensuring a resilient and cutting-edge energy infrastructure for all the generations to come, to the promotion of sustainable practice and the integration of renewable energy sources. And our aim is to mitigate environmental impacts, reduce the carbon emissions, and contribute significantly to the global fight against the climate change. Next slide, please. Today, let's embark on a journey where through intricate pathways of Aruba's national energy policy, we will explore the ambitious goals that has been written down in a policy plan and strategies and all the collaborative spirit that defines Aruba's commitment to renewable energy and sustainable development. So without further ado, let's delve into the dimensions, the 5 dimensions that has been designed. As you can see here, we have 5 dimensions. The first one is the energy efficiency, which comprises of 3 objectives in order to serve that first dimension. The second dimension, the decarbonization. The third is the energy security. The fourth, the inter-energy market and regulatory framework. And the last one being the research and innovation dimension. So, you can slide this. So the first dimension, the energy efficiency. This dimension we have as objective is we want to increase energy efficiency among businesses and households regarding energy conservative behavior that we want to stimulate, and increase energy efficiency in companies by 15% is our aim towards 2030, you can say. If you can tab. So as you can see here, the first measures or the strategy you can say for this particular objective to this dimension is that we want to first have information, awareness campaigns, and education that is aimed at encouraging energy conscious behavior. As I said, to companies and trade organizations and households. And this included conscious use of drinking water as well. Slide, please. The second measure or strategy you can say is to we want to import ban on traditional incandescent lamps, the traditional lamps, and traditional cooling equipments that are not efficient. Second. Also, as third, for this particular objective, we want to maintain the current 20% import duty rate for imports of energy efficient equipment. Slide. And fourth, we want to promote sustainability of the built environment, both new construction and existing ones construction, retrofitting aimed at reducing cooling load. And by this, I meant information regarding sustainable and circular construction, including awareness for the total cost over the circle, the lifelong circle of the building, and introduction of framework for the energy performance of buildings, the building energy performance, to provide insights on the energy usage and the water usage. For this time being, it's not being made mandatory, but seeing the current pace that we're heading, it will become mandatory. Also, we want to do an introduction of guidelines in the buildings regulation to promote sustainable construction. And also, we want to emphasize that construction practices and materials that we applied LEED methodology for this for reaching those and the energy performance KPIs and ultimately the sustainable development goals. Currently, utilities Aruba as the holding company to all the 4 subsidiaries, Wellmar, and also the wastewater company. We have embarked on a very ambitious new building and construction design that is LEED, that will be LEED accredited as a gold level certification. So you could see this project being a project that set the tone for other subsidiaries to also embark on this kind of initiatives to make the buildings more efficient and recognized by third parties through this LEED methodologies. Slide, please. And yes, and fifth, we also want to stimulate energy audits, facilitate and establish of energy service companies, ESCO, through interventions such as training for professionals or public-private partnerships. Next. And encourage the use of the so-called carbon credits within private sectors. That is also a good way to fighting the climate and reaching the carbon neutrality. Next. As a second objective within this specific dimension of energy efficiency, the guaranteeing of affordable energy. I would say that in order to guarantee access to affordable energy for all our urban citizens, companies, and our prestige tourists, this means that energy rates represent a reasonable level of expenditure contributed to energy and drinking water costs in a normal situation, consumption amount. For example, on average, no more than 13.5% of the disposable.
Akim?
So, yes?
Sorry to interrupt you. I know we started a bit late, but just to make sure that we finish on time.
Okay.
could we just maybe touch upon the main things, because also slides will be available later on.
Okay.
So maybe
The time limit is 3 o'clock, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So 6 minutes. So I would say if you can just slide so that we can have all those strategies lined up for this particular objective. Okay. So yes, basically in this particular objective for this specific dimension, as you can see, we have 4 strategy written down in order to achieve this affordable energy objective. And I would say all 4 are the main are important in order to have a effective policy monitoring and such thing. Next. Yes. So combat energy poverty, that's also one of the objectives in order to reduce energy efficiency. For this, we also have 4 strategies that we have designed for, and introduction of guidance program, energy coach, and budget coaching. Reconnection meter aimed at socially disadvantaged people, so people that cannot afford their energy bill. We provide also coaching on how they can better budget their energy bill. Next slide. I will go really briefly into this, seeing that it's like 5 minutes till 3 o'clock, so it's quite fast. For this particular dimension 2, decarbonization, the first objective in order to reach this dimension is we want to reduce greenhouse gas emission from the energy sector. And the strategies for this is obviously want to increase the renewable energy production, be more efficient with the fossil fuel usage, and reduce transport-related emissions. And I would say those 3 are the main priority within those 7 strategies. Next. We also, as one of the objectives is want to increase production of renewable energy. By this, we want to, seeing that Aruba is a very small island, there's a lot of obstruction, you can say, when it comes to spatial integration. There's not enough space, and we want to involve more citizens in this kind of decision-making process regarding new energy systems. And second, we also have more increased the social involvement in sustainable energy projects, and we want to do it through cooperative or participation capital and energy expansion projects. And also we want to do the realization of new wind parks and solar energy expansion projects, that we will be having a second wind farm in Rincon. That will be also a 30 megawatt project of wind. And we will be having a third solar park that is also a 50 megawatt capacity that will be using all on the other substations that we have and parking lots that we will be using in order to create that third solar park project. So I will say that the first 3 are the most important strategies in order to increase the energy, renewable energy. The other objective within this specific, within this dimension, the energy security, we want to guarantee energy security in short and long term. I would say in short term, we want to basically ensure the reliability for the entire fuel import and value chain of the production and distribution of electricity and drinking water, in accordance with applicable regulations, of course. And in a more long term, you can say that we want to ensure that Aruba is ultimately independent as possible from all external sources in the long term. So basically reaching, hopefully, quite ambitious 90 to 100% renewable energy production in the long term. Next. For that dimension, the internal energy market and regulatory framework. For that goal, we have as objectives, we want to establish an effective policy and regulatory framework. And by doing that, we want to establish as we have already, this particular national energy policy, and have it do a publication on the National Gazette in order to be visual for all government workers, that we all know and have access to this national energy policy. And second, we want to also establish a policy-making body, energy directorate within the government. And I would say establishing an independent authority for the energy sector as part of the competition authority, the Netherlands Authority for the Market and Consumers. So those three are, in my opinion, the most important strategies within this specific objectives to reach that specific dimension. The second objective, we want to pursue reform of tariff structure. The strategy for this specific objective is we want to rebalancing subscriptions versus usage fees, limiting movement between products or rate groups, and introduction of day and night rates. And as you can see, investigate effectiveness and possibly revise social mechanism and rate structure. So those three are the strategies that we are implementing in order to pursue reform of tariff structure within this specific dimension. Next. The other objective is we also want to pursue a coherence with other policy instruments. So, and that's within and outside the energy sector, of course. As you can see, there are various other policy instruments in place right now that need to have a coherence with the national energy policy in order to make sure that all the other policy instruments from other departments are in line with the vision that we have established. So that's also one of the strategies that for this particular dimension. Next. And lastly, our last dimension is the research and innovation. We want to stimulate research and innovation in energy transition, and the strategy therefore is we want to explore technology options and carry out pilot projects for renewable energy and other than conventional wind and solar energy. I would say that for this particular dimension and objective, we have partnered with local University of Aruba, where I'm a student at, and basically we will do most of R&D projects regarding flowing water, because seeing that Aruba is such a small island, we don't have enough space for wind and solar onshore projects for wind and solar. We are trying to exploring new energy system around of the ocean, that we have enough space in order to harness that energy, untapped energy, I would say. So that's one of the strategies that we're doing in collaboration with University of Aruba. And also, as you can see, stimulating behavior research and continual technical development. So that's very short, our introduction. Sadly, the time is very short, and I had to slide very fast through it.
Yeah, sorry about that, Akim. And
No problem.
The presentation will be available to participants here. I think you guys are taking a very ambitious approach here, and it's really interesting to see all the different, let's say, objectives that are set, and it's going to be interesting to follow how this gets implemented. But I really don't want to keep people here longer, because I do know that you have other appointments and obligations. So I would like to thank you today, and just remind that next week we'll be diving a bit more, into the regulation, which is really needed for implementation. And we'll be discussing, you mentioned the tariffs bit, that's going to be in the discussion. Second training next week, and then also the regulation for energy efficiency and renewables. So Thank you so much for today. I hope the training has been useful. Please feel free to send us your feedback, and we see you next week. Have a great day.
Bye.
And thanks, Han
Thank
and
you.
Akin.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
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 Bye.